We are live! But did you know this? We're also on tape. It's quite incredible. From beautiful downtown Kamloops, we are in the bowels of Lee's Music, and Foulds' phone is going off, and we're going to work with that. Foulds, strike one for you today. You know, you backed in today, too, and I thought you were going to have a good show, and you start off by embarrassing yourself.
I got a call this morning from a radio host in Billings, Montana, while I'm walking my dog.
Again.
Yes. I'm walking the dog around my neighborhood, and the phone rings, and I answer it, and it's a guy from Billings, Montana, asking if he can use a photo for some country music concert that's coming to his fair city in Montana. We had a good talk. He said everyone there is like walking around like there's no pandemic. So anyway, there's the aside.
Okay, we're in the bowels of Lee's Music. It's state-of-the-art studio too. We do have a great show today. Jeremy Kneeshaw, up-and-coming Indigenous artist with some great hair as well. Some of the best, most luscious locks you'll find in Kamloops. We have Jessica Hewitt, Olympic silver medalist speed skater, and Chris, we're doing something a little bit different today with your segment.
Yeah, we normally with my segment we lead into an interview with a newsmaker, and so this week, and we'll do this now and then, we're going to talk about a number of different issues, because if there's anything we know, Kamloops is full of news. I mean, we have so many news media in this town, and we have so many news stories that today we'll touch on 4 or 5 and just chat about it and go from there.
I like this idea, and none of it happens, of course, without our title sponsor. Holmes is where the heart is, personalized matchmaking.
This is a lock I gave one of my couples when they got married. Hi, I'm Tara Holmes from Holmes is where the heart is, Personalized Matchmaking Limited. If you are tired of the emotional roller coaster of online dating, where people are getting ghosted, there's fake profiles, and your picture is on display for everyone to see, contact me for my discreet, private, customized service, where I actually meet everybody first to make sure that they're a fit for you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at HolmesHeartIs or HolmesIsWhereTheHeartIs.ca, and maybe one day we'll be locking in your love right here.
We thank Tara again. That was her third and final week as our title sponsor. And just one more plug for Tara. You and I know her. I think really if you're looking to find a partner, which I know many people are, relationships blew up during the pandemic. Tara's a great person to talk to. She's personable. Mike's laughing behind the camera, not sure what happened there. She's personable, she really cares about you, and she'll do her best to find somebody for you. That being said, we do have some more sponsorship news that we're going to tease right now. We're going to be turning over a new leaf starting next week with our brand new title sponsor. Can't wait to show you the new commercial there, and we're going to turn over a new leaf in this next segment, which is Above the Folds.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, these are basically images for 4 stories that we have been working on, we've published. Let's start with the weather. Everyone's talking about the weather, and it's Kamloops, so it's always hot here in the summertime, but some people seem to forget that. Some people move here thinking that they're going to be in Abbotsford, where it rains all the time. So this week, we are in potentially historic waters. We have Environment Canada saying we might hit 40 degrees this weekend, which is June 26th and 27th, which is amazing because June is usually the rainiest month, historically wise. And if we hit 41, 42 degrees, we might set an all-time record. The all-time record ever in Kamloops was 41.7 in 39 and 1941.
I get that this is a news story. It's hot and things happen and people talk about it a lot, but I can never get over the fact that in Kamloops, people are so bamboozled by the fact that it's super hot, it's almost July, or that October comes around and we've got a snowfall a little bit early, and out come the Facebook posts, and people are just blown away by this. Like, you know where you live in Canada, number one. You've also chosen to live in the interior. It gets hot. Can we not act like this is just the most amazing, crazy thing that's ever happened?
It's a water cooler talk. Everyone talks about the weather. Weather and dogs and car accidents are the 3 things that make up most newspapers in the old days. But it's something else. You know, in our newspaper this week, we went with the weather because it's the most talked about thing. We might hit a record, which is always interesting. You get to that magic 100 Fahrenheit degree, and then there's sidebar stories. You know the SPCA warning about pets in cars. People. You got to get your kid hydrated. You got to watch out for the seniors, etc. So it flows into legitimate news stories as well.
Yeah, I know a transformer blew yesterday at District biking. I'm pretty sure that had to do with the heat too. So I get it. It's a news story, but people have to adapt. Okay, get your fan on and just shut up sometimes. It's just
That's right. When I first moved here in '05, I moved to Aberdeen, and the house did not, and still does not, I don't think, because I sold it, have air conditioning. Nor do I ever use air conditioning in the car because I hate air conditioning. So it's an ongoing battle with my wife and my kids about put the air conditioning on. I hate it. So I like the heat. I'm a lizard. I love the heat. Quick trivia question. There's 50 U.S. states. Only 2 have never seen temperatures exceed 100 Fahrenheit, which is 38 Celsius. Can you name them?
no.
Okay.
What are they?
It's Alaska and Hawaii. Surprising.
Hawaii?
Yes.
Really?
So one more trivia question just for our viewers. There's only 3 provinces or territories that have never seen 100-degree weather. If you can name that on our YouTube page, the first correct answer will get some swag once we get it made.
Okay, good. Nice plug. Let's move on to the next topic. What do you want to talk about next?
How about the Fortune Motel? Fortune Motel is a iconic landmark on Fortune Drive in North Kamloops, right across from the McDonald's and the North Hills Centre Mall. And last week, the province announced big news. BC Housing purchased the whole property for about $3.5 million, $3.2 million, with the plan to use it for affordable housing like we've seen elsewhere in the city. The twist here is the city council really wasn't aware of this. They weren't told about this, so they're kind of caught unawares. Not that they're opposed to it, but they just want more information about what's going to happen to this motel and who's going to be living there. Obviously, we know it's the marginalized, the homeless, the hard to house. But it's the latest in a number of places in Kamloops where they're building places or turning existing motels into affordable housing for the homeless.
And we talked about this a few weeks ago on our show about criminality and criminals capitalizing on the homeless situation and taking advantage of some of the homeless people. And this on the surface seems like a good idea, doesn't it? I mean, but also talking to you in the parking lot, there's a lot of issues that come along with this that people aren't happy about it in the city.
Yeah, there's a lot of angles to this. I don't think anyone could disagree that if we have people living on a riverbank or people struggling on the streets, putting them in a place like the Fortune Motel or the motels, the Maverick Motel up in Aberdeen or the ones along Columbia Street that have turned into completely affordable housing places, no one can argue that's a bad thing. A lot of the arguments from this is people are saying, well, this particular motel might be too close to Arthur Hatton Elementary. There's some concern about that online. The other thing is a lot of people are saying, well, why do all of the social supports and the social housing have to be, congregated in one area, usually North Kamloops and the downtown West Victoria streets? And a lot of people online, why don't I put it in Aberdeen? Why not build it in Batchelor, where I live? And I guess the argument is it's like a chicken and the egg. There's no services up there, so you want to build it where people can walk to services. And then people say, well, put services up there. Well, you can because it's a residential area. But there's a lot of what people call NIMBYism for people who don't want this in their backyard. But those who don't want it argue it's not NIMBYism, it's legitimate concerns that they do support it, but just not here.
Yeah, and there are business owners who have contacted me, and a lot of them, they don't want to go on the record because they come across as people who are, anti-homeless and are just intolerant people. But I can understand their plight. I mean, it's affecting their bottom line, and that's not fair too.
No, it's not, and it's a very sensitive and very hard to find happy medium to get to that. But I think in this particular case, the motel is between a bunch of apartment buildings. It's across from a commercial district. Sure, it's close to Arthur Hatton, but you could argue that the people who might be living there might already be near Arthur Hatton on the street. So I don't think that is that big of an issue. But we'll see how it goes. They have to get rezoning before they even do this, but it will become social housing.
And we're going to keep talking about that, I'm sure, in the show. Let's talk about the plastic bags.
Oh yes, the plastic bags. Shortly after she was elected in the 2018 civic election, our former colleague Dale Bass, one of her issues that she brought forward was to have Kamloops ban single-use plastic bags and other things for the environment. And the city was going through it. They were following. Victoria did it. I think another municipality did it. But then a court ruling came down that said that those bans superseded some provincial legislation. They had to revamp it. So the proposed ban in Kamloops was put on the back burner. And then last week, council has just said that they're going to wait till later this year to enact this plastic bag ban because they're waiting on provincial and federal laws to get sorted out, which is fine. I just think the plastic bag ban is kind of misguided. With all due respect to Dale, bless her heart, we love her. But if you think about it, the plastic bags, and there's studies been done by National Geographic last year, Northern Ireland Environmental Committee in 2006. You have to use a paper bag between 3 and 43 times to negate its environmental impact. A paper bag takes 4 times as much greenhouse gas emission energy than it does to make a plastic bag. I have plastic bags coming out of my drawers at work, as you know, in my office. I have a whole pantry full of plastic bags at home. I'm a plastic guy because I use that bag over and over and over and over. I'm probably more green with my plastic than Kermit the Frog. And so I don't think, and I go into Safeway or go into another store and I see there's no plastic bags anymore. There's only paper bags you got to buy or boxes. So I feel like I'm moving or I have to take a paper bag and I'm doing a worse, my carbon footprint's worse because the paper bag weighs more.
I'm not sure I have a fully formed opinion on this. Foulds' rant has me kind of convinced, and I do use plastic bags too, but I also have seen the video, I've seen the pictures of animals, or fish and wrapped up in these plastic bags and dead, and also in the middle of the ocean with all this plastic gathered. So that's tough to ignore as well.
That is a legitimate concern, seriously, is the environmental impact on the animals, but I think it's so few and far between that. I'm not sure I've ever seen any animals in Kamloops stuck in a plastic bag. But the thing is, if you use it properly and you reuse the plastic bags and then you dispose of them properly in a landfill, I don't think there's an issue.
We mentioned Dale Bass. Just want to give a shout out to Dale Bass. She lost her son. Dale, we love you, and we're thinking about you. One more topic before we move on here. John Horgan.
Premier John Horgan is in the news this week because it has been confirmed through estimate questionings. That's the questioning of the government, not in the House in the question period, but in the committee rooms. Last week, our 2 MLAs, Todd Stone and Peter Millibar, again questioned John Horgan on his commitment for the cancer care clinic that he made for Kamloops last year. During the October election, which isn't that long ago, John Horgan had announced, right after the Liberals had also made the same promise, that a cancer care clinic would be coming to Kamloops as part of the 10-year NDP cancer care plan. But when he appeared here a week before the election, he was asked by Sean Brady, KTW reporter, well, will you build it in the next 4 years, in the first 4 years of your mandate? And John Horgan said, the services will be prepared and delivered within the mandate of the next government, absolutely. He's on the record as promising that the cancer clinic will be built in the next 4 years, before 2024. Now it appears it's not going to be built in those 4 years, and that it might be built in 10 years, and maybe not, and that's upset Stone and Millibar, and probably a lot of other people who have to still travel to Kelowna to get radiation therapy, as Dale Bass did.
So it boils down to a broken promise, and
it appears to be a broken promise.
And I think that it's a broken promise that even the casual voter will remember. You know, this is something, it's a big deal. A lot of people have been touched by cancer. It's a big promise to make it to not come through on.
And it's amplified by the fact that this is an NDP government that I think most people would say has done a pretty good job through the pandemic, through its mandate, better than most people think. They've had some stumbles. But it's amplified because this broken promise is an echo of the 1991 broken promise by then NDP government led by Mike Harcourt. When they were running in 91 and they became government for the first time in 20 years, they promised Kamloops a cancer care clinic as part of their bid to get votes. And within a few months of being elected, the cancer clinic was built in Kelowna. And a lot of Kamloopsians were really, really choked about that. So, you know, in another generation, it seems like the same promise. So it's not a good look.
Do we want to touch on traffic in Kamloops right now?
You want to touch on traffic in Kamloops right now?
Well, I mean, it just seems like the Brain Trust gets together and says, okay, we have to do construction on our main thoroughfares. Let's do it all in the same week and create pandemonium and gridlock. It's just like, can we space it out a little bit? I mean, you've been raging to me about driving and how long it takes to get across the city. Maybe I'm just out to lunch here, but it seems like we got to pick the same week to do this stuff.
Well, I think it's a grand plan by the New World Order, the United Nations, to take our mind off the pandemic, just to get them all mad about the traffic. No, I think what it is we have a finite amount of time that we can do it. We all know that, but it is weird that they have to do it all the time. I believe there are certain projects that are funded partially or fully by senior levels of government grants, and they have certain conditions, and they have to be shovel ready. They have to be done by this time, by this time, by this time. But I think it would be a good idea to have one of the experts down at City Hall to talk to us and explain to us what seems ridiculous to us, why it makes sense.
Okay, fair enough. And speaking of roads, which we were, I know somebody who's on the road to greatness musically. His name is Jeremy Kneeshaw, and we're going to meet him in this next segment, which is the Tattle of Hastings. I knew of Jeremy. You and I have actually seen him live at the Plaza before. I love his style of music. It's kind of a funk fusion. He plays a million instruments. He's got unbelievable hair. Do you remember seeing him play?
I vaguely remember seeing him play, and now that you mentioned that he came over to our table, we've seen a lot of people play at the Plaza, which is a great place to see people play in the corner there. It's a really intimate place, and I do remember seeing him play, and he does have fantastic hair.
Did you ever grow your hair out?
Well, when I was probably his age, yeah, I should bring some high school pictures. I had the hair rocking, but it wasn't styled like Jeremy's was.
Okay, well, you can send me a photo, hopefully, and we'll get it up, and I'll show a picture of my favorite high school hair. So I did know Jeremy a little bit. I knew he was a nice guy. I didn't know he was an Indigenous man, and I didn't know he was an extremely thoughtful young man who we're going to meet right now in this interview right here. Jeremy Kneeshaw, thanks for joining us on Kamloops Last Week. You're our first ever musician to be on the show. The Kamloops music scene, how would you describe the Kamloops music scene in general?
It's coming back. It's been a long time since any of us have been able to perform or play live anywhere because of the COVID restrictions, but we're starting to be able to get things back together again, and I'm starting to book shows and play with other people. The scene is good, I think. A lot of us, we've been cooped up for a long time, but we've also been spending that time practicing, and I always say, Kamloops is such a talent-heavy town. There's so many good musicians and good singers and good players and people in town, and we're all, we're ready to hit it even harder than we were before now. So
I think it was 2015 that you decided to say, I'm done being a carpenter and I'm going to be full-time musician. I imagine that was a huge leap. I guess how scary was that at the time, and how far have you come since then?
It was scary at the time, and I eventually had to get another job. And I worked for a little while, but I'm actually back doing it again. And obviously now, being married and being a homeowner and that sort of thing, it is scary. It's, you don't have a 9-to-5, right? You don't, and ideally you never will again, kind of, right? It is scary. It's definitely not something that you take lightly. You make sure that you are budgeting for making $0 for a few months or, or longer. But it was really good for me. It was really, like, it gave me the opportunity to really focus on what I wanted, not just in music, but in life, for me personally, like I love to, it's not that I don't like the idea of working. It's just like, if I need to dump 16 hours in a day on a recording project or a, show rehearsal or something like that, I can. And because of that, I've been able to really hone my craft, quite a bit more than I think I would have been able to otherwise.
Before we get into the serious questions, I wanted to ask you about your hair, because I'm jealous of your hair. I always have been. It's legendary hair. Yeah, look at that. I mean, what product do you use? How are you blessed with this hair? And do you think you're going to have it till you die, basically, this beautiful head of hair?
What I think is that what I lack in facial hair ability, I gained in head hair ability. You have a nice thick beard all the way through, and I just, it's so patchy and horrible, and I think it's my genetics. Being an Indigenous guy, they're not known for great facial hair. But my products, I'll be honest, I use my wife's shampoo, so obviously whatever works for her is working for me too.
You mentioned that you're Indigenous. It's National Indigenous Peoples Day today. How have you been affected by the news of the remains that were found here in Kamloops?
It's gutting, it really is. And I think when sort of the harsh truth and the harsh reality of it is that for a lot of Indigenous people, this isn't news. They've known this the whole time, right? They lived through this and they've seen it. And it's not something that's so far in the past that it's all but forgotten. Like, my mom was adopted by a white family when she was 3, but all of her cousins all went to the residential school. And like, that's my mom. Like, that's one generation. That's not even that far, right? So it's gutting is how I would describe it. And it's just the amount of this atrocity, and the amount of people that would be willing to sort of turn a blind eye because it didn't affect them. It's scary. But the other side of it, though, is that now it is getting attention, and people are willing to look at it in the face and see this is a people group that genocide was committed on. And it's not, far away somewhere. It's not in Africa somewhere. It's like 2 minutes from downtown, you know. And I'm sure, as you've seen, there's the monument set up and the kids' clothes and stuff. And I can still barely drive by there and hold it together, man. It's really sad.
I didn't know about your mom, and how much was it relayed to you through her and your family of some of the things that had gone on out there?
Well, my grandpa Pion, he basically drank himself to death, and he was never willing to talk about his time at the school. I do have relatives that said that they had fun at school. You know, nothing happened to them, and they learned how to read, and they had a good time. But you know, I grew up on the reserve, and I went to Scalap School when it opened up, and you know, there's certain things that you can't tell kids, but there wasn't very much I remember that they shied away from talking about. I do remember there being stories from, you know, the elders in my family who would talk about, you know, their time there. They'd talk about seeing, you know, suddenly their friend would disappear and they'd say that they'd try to run away or whatever. I learned a lot about it, but I don't know. And I almost feel guilty because in a way I kind of sort of always would kind of push it to the back of my mind. And, you know, it never really, I guess because it's so horrible, I didn't want to believe it. And then obviously finding the bodies of these kids that were there, it suddenly I'm realizing everything I ever heard was true, you know? And, you know, it's a lot of information, and it's a lot to process, really.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about your grandpa there, and that's a sad story. And we talked to TRU Chancellor Nathan Matthew last week, and he's talking about how a lot of Indigenous people grow up with this shame, and they don't even know why, and it can lead to things like alcoholism. What about you? Did you ever feel any shame or you know, experience racism growing up in Kamloops?
Yes and no. I've definitely experienced a lot of like inappropriate cultural sort of jokes and that sort of thing, or like I've had where, you know, I had short hair for most of my life, and you know, when I don't really have a tan, you can't really tell that I'm Indigenous. So, you know, and so I'd be working with somebody for like a year, and then it would come out that I am Native and grew up on the res, you know, and suddenly they act totally different around me, and they're, you know, scared of me almost, right? And I don't want to say that I've experienced racism, because I think that would almost sort of devalue the real racism that like a lot of my people have really dealt with. But I've definitely been the center of a lot of cultural insensitivity, I would say. Not by everybody, obviously, but there's a few people, and I think it's mostly just ignorance, right? They don't know what to say or what's funny or what's appropriate anymore, you know?
Yeah, we can kind of move back into some music questions here, because you, I think like funk fusion is how I've seen your music described, and you play a bunch of instruments like guitar, piano, drums, bass, mandolin, banjo, flute, accordion, probably a bunch more. Did your Indigenous background help form the way that you play music?
That's a great question. I think so. You know, a lot of Indigenous music, it's like a lot of powwow songs, for instance, they don't really have words. They have kind of phrases and sort of, you know, vowel sort of noises that they will sing. And like, so often one person will sing something and then everybody else will repeat it back to them. And the idea behind that is because not everybody spoke the same language in the old days. And so if you went to a powwow with somebody you couldn't speak to, at least you could sing with them, right? And for Indigenous people, music is it's a very like spiritual, emotional sort of time, like a healing song, for instance. Like, you know, you sing it because you want to sing with people, and you want to have that time set aside to be, you know, spiritually aware of what you're doing, as well as, you know, emotionally invested in the song that you're singing. And I think that's always been my approach to music in any genre, in any language as well, is that it's an emotional experience. I think, you know, if you don't have emotion in music, then it's kind of like, you know, a shell of what music is about. And so yeah, I do think that my heritage and my upbringing, at least in in the powwow scene and that sort of thing, has translated for me, at least with playing with other musicians or two crowds and things.
What about you personally? What's the latest and greatest with your music? Where can we see you? Where can we find you online? Any shows coming up? Give us the rundown.
Okay, yes. I've been recording a lot, and so I've been doing mostly post-scoring things, but I do have another album coming out. It'll be volume 4, and as you know, they've all been called the Jeremy Kneeshaw album, so I think this one I'm just going to call it 4, just like Led Zeppelin. And I'm aiming for that to be out sort of around Christmas time. And as for shows and that sort of thing, I've got lots of different solo things, and my band is getting back together for a big sort of bash and party out at Privado Winery in the Gardens on August the 27th. And from what I know right now, tickets are still available online, so that's where we're going to be.
On the album, can we expect any duets with your wife?
I have been hoping for that, and a lot of people have as well. So we're gonna try to talk her into it. So far, it's a no, but it's not always a she might come around. She plays keys in the band now, so I mean that's the next logical step.
Nice. I guess what about your ultimate goal? What's your ultimate goal in music? Do you have a somewhere that you want to end up, or a place you want to play, or what are your goals with music?
I always tell people that my biggest dream in life is to be famous enough to be on Jimmy Fallon.
All right.
And I feel like that's relatively attainable. He has lots of people on his show. But yeah, more seriously, I think for me personally, I care more about people being able to hear my music than to become famous, I guess. And you kind of have one with the other a lot of times, but for me, I would rather somebody be able to hear it than to pay me for it, for instance. So to be, the biggest compliment I can get as a musician is somebody coming up and saying, "Man, I heard your song and it really resonated with me. It said what I was feeling."
Well, I like your music. I'm also going to tag Jimmy Fallon in this post, and maybe this appearance on Kamloops Last week is going to be your big break. So thanks for...
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marty. I really thank you for your questions and the show too. I really appreciate the effort that you're putting into shining light on community things that we're all dealing with.
Chris, any more thoughts on Jeremy?
That was a great interview. It really was. I think I didn't know about the background about his mom being adopted into a white family, his cousins going to the residential school, the tragic story of his grandfather. It just goes to see he's got some depth with his thoughts too, and I just thought that was a really enlightening interview, and it wasn't because he was really thinking and he was giving some good answers, and he was being quite honest and raw. I liked it.
It was Magic Mike Miltimore who suggested Jeremy Kneeshaw to me, and they are in the early planning stages of a project that we're going to talk about a bit more to help with the healing process with what happened in the residential school. Today's show also kind of worked out really well. We have Jessica Hewitt coming on next. She's an Olympic silver medalist speed skater, earned her master's from Concordia University in Montreal with a thesis that focuses on some interesting Indigenous issues. So let's meet her in this next segment, this week. Jessica, you can come on in right now if we have you. There you are. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Doing real well. Before we get into some serious questions, you and I have a major bone to pick, okay? Going back to 2014, we had a huge race. I think I embarrassed you pretty well, but what do you remember about that race?
The burning memory I have is that you called me out for cheating, but yeah, I don't think any cheating really happened. But
I think it was a false start. I think it was.
False start.
Is there any truth to you retiring, your skating career ending because of the embarrassment of that loss?
Yeah, I mean, I give you all credit for my retirement.
Okay, let's talk about your retirement because you stopped skating 7 years ago now. Why did you stop skating, and how did that kind of have an impact on your life?
I think it was just time for me to move on. As many people can guess, elite sports is very time consuming and takes a lot of your energy, a lot of all of your focus. So it was just time for me to move on to something else and focus on a different area of my life, and that's been school. But I mean, it was a tough transition. I went from kind of living in this perfect little bubble and going to Europe and Asia every year in the winter time to being like kind of just thrown into the real world. So, um, yeah, it's been good, but tough as well.
You mentioned identity, kind of a void in identity. Can you expand on what you meant by that?
Yeah, I mean, I really identified and I still identify with being an athlete. Although I'm kind of out of shape right now, but it's something I was doing every day for, 17 years. So it was such a big part of my life. I lived, breathed, and slept speed skating. So, um, since I was 10 years old to 27 years old. So who am I after I'm not doing this sport every day? And so that's been a journey for me.
And that was 2014. At 2016, you lost your father. How did that also contribute to your kind of crisis of identity?
Yeah, I mean, it's my dad was like a big foundation for me, always supportive, always there to listen and just a great person. So that really shook my world. He kind of left the world suddenly, and it took me a while to kind of get back to being grounded and trying to also figure out who I am again. And normally sports are another way of kind of putting energy into something, and it helps in the healing process. So I didn't have my sport to help me with that. So that also made it difficult.
You were married 2016. Was your dad able to be there?
No, we got married after. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier education was a way that you kind of dug yourself out of maybe this hole a little bit. So how much did you pour yourself into education, and how much did that end up helping you?
I mean, I have I think there's a lot of good things about school, and I think I learned there's also some challenges with school too. Um I committed to it. I ended up struggling to commit at some points of finishing my thesis, but there is a like a it's tough, like it's hard, and sitting and writing and being confident enough to do that. And coming from a sports background, I didn't have as much of the years of experience as maybe some of my peers. So yeah, I kind of just tried to tell my story, or my connection to the story I was trying to tell. And that ended up being working with Kwantlen First Nation. I'm actually a member of Kwantlen First Nation, and just going through the history. And I created a lot of maps talking about the history and the Halkomenum place names, like just trying to show that there's already a history here that we don't always know about.
Yeah, so can you expand on that, the work you're about to start?
Yeah, so I got a job with Kwantlen First Nation doing cultural heritage repatriation. So, kind of creating a database. I have to learn a lot. It's not something I know too much about, but I did a lot of research before. So, just kind of trying to create a database and track down where cultural heritage artifacts are being held in museums across the world or private collections, and trying to figure out where they are, what they are, and then trying to ask to bring them back home.
We've been focusing on this show for 3 or 4 weeks now about the findings at the residential school here in Kamloops. What did you make of that news, and how did it affect you?
I was devastated. I was so sad. I, I struggled for a while. I mean, we all know that it happened, the residential school, or maybe we don't all know, but a lot of people are learning about residential schools. But just that discovery is just so heartbreaking. I have a daughter now. She's not even that I have a daughter, but I have a daughter that's 15 months old. And man, someone taking your daughter away, your child away from you, and that's what happened. You know, like we need to be more sensitive and talk about these things.
I thought you're a timely interview as well because you have some insight on the pandemic and how it's affected business, because you live in Montreal, you're in Montreal right now, but you're the president of the Kamloops Longblades. So how does that work?
Yeah, so with COVID, obviously it's very devastating, lots of people losing their lives, and but it's forced us to operate in different ways, and Kamloops Longblades has become a lot of more virtual and digital for their meetings, so it kind of gave an opportunity for me to get involved. And yeah, it's a role that I haven't been in before, but I'm very excited to see if I can bring anything to the table, and also just I'm open to learning and trying to contribute to the club, because that's where I started, you know, and I wanted to go back to that a little bit.
The club is in a spot of financial bother, I take it, and you have taken on a project to try and help that. What's the project?
Yeah, so since the pandemic, we've lost about 50% of our membership. A lot of it is because we just couldn't have as many athletes on the ice. And then a lot of parents decided to kind of pull their kids out temporarily as well, just to avoid the potential of getting sick, right? So the measures are going to be changing, we think, in September, so it will allow us a lot more people on the ice. So we're basically trying to raise money just to get. We need to raise $10,000 basically just to kind of pay our ice fees for the year, which is like a big part of the cost of our club. And so that we're raising money, I started a GoFundMe page. I don't know if you have the link, if you can
We'll post
share
it.
that.
We'll post it for sure.
Yeah, and then we're also asking, you know, once things goes back to normal, if people want to come out and start speed skating again or try the sport, we're looking to increase our membership probably in you know, when things get a little bit more settled with COVID.
My son who's now 20, and he's actually going to McGill. He'll be in Montreal in 2 months. But he first learned to skate with the Longblades, and not speed skating, with their Learn to Skate program. And then he went to minor hockey. And but if it wasn't for the Longblades, he would never have skated, which is good. It's a good program. Jessica, you have been at the highest platform. You've been to the Olympics. There's been a lot of talk recently about whether or not athletes should consider boycotting the Beijing Games because of the human rights abuses of the Chinese government. There's a lot of debate on both sides of it. And it has happened before where protests at the Olympics have come up, most notably the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. What's your thoughts on that question, and how do you view it?
Oh man, that's a tough question. You know, I mean, no country. Are there any countries that don't have human rights issues right now or in the past? I don't know. I remember being at the games, and it's tough because it's political, but it's not at the same time. Like even when in Russia, you know, Putin, like 2 weeks after the games ended, they invaded Ukraine. Yeah. You know, like it's like things do stop for that period of time, but it doesn't really force countries to actually do real action, to have real action be done. It just kind of like delays the inevitable unless they need to change the whole system.
Do you think
athletes do have a power to kind of boycott, I guess, and force some action, but I don't know if that's a lasting action.
I've heard others say, and I kind of agree with this sentiment, rather than boycott and not go, because then your voice isn't there, people have said the athletes should definitely go, but they should be more free, or they should speak their minds when they're there, which would have a larger impact like they did in Mexico City.
Yeah. You also have to think that, I mean, athletes have put, I had this goal for 17 years to achieve this goal.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, my event's, 2 minutes long, like it's not even 4 minutes long, and that's my time,
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that if you say you win a medal, or you're even interviewed and you have a couple of minutes after your interview, through your interview process, you have a lot more eyes on you to raise the issues, for sure.
Yeah.
I know I'd be devastated as an athlete if my dreams were dashed for a boycott that is political and is not going to exact any change. That's my stance on it. Jessica, anything else you want to add before we let you go?
No, I think that's good. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I know maybe you would have been in future Olympics if you didn't sheepishly lose to me. So if you ever want a rematch back in Kamloops, I'm ready to go. I'm in great shape, and anytime you want to go, I'm ready to go.
All right, I'll keep that in mind, and maybe it'll force me to train a little bit harder.
Okay, thanks.
How's your training been going, by the way?
I'm a platinum member at Planet Fitness. Okay, I got the free monthly upgrade, so I'm even using their hydro massage chairs and getting loose for the big matchup.
Do you actually go, or do you just have the membership?
I've been going solid since January. It's on. Okay, get over here. Get back to Kamloops.
Jessica, we heard about that tornado north of Montreal, 40 kilometers. First of all, stay safe. But was it stormy in Montreal, or was that kind of far away?
It was, well, I didn't even know about it. My grandma told me. Mm-hmm. But it was windy, so yeah. We did have a lot of wind over the last few days.
Yeah. All right.
More pointless talk about the weather. Okay. Thanks a lot, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.
I think that's it for our show. Any final thoughts?
No, she's very thoughtful too. And about that boycott thing, I agree with you. I've come around. I don't think they should boycott because, like you say, they're working their tails off, and it's every 4 years to get a shot at the highest podium, and for like 2 minutes. But I do think each country IOC committee should say, hey, speak your truth, as like she said.
You shouldn't boycott us. In fact, you should subscribe. Kamloops Last Week and all your major podcast providers were up and running on all of those. One more final thanks to Holmes is Where the Heart is, personalized matchmaking, for jumping on board with us, getting the ball rolling. We've got New Leaf next week, and again, Magic Mike and Bonnie behind the camera trying to make us look good. Thanks very much, and we'll see you last week.
Last week.